Hey, this Life in Tech episode 168. I'm Jason.
Dan.
And I'm still TK.
I thought he was going to refer to himself as Lex Luthor.
Not yet. Not yet. Soon. Maybe. You never know.
But and you have to say it like the first Superman movie.
Yeah.
Lex
First
Luthor.
Superman movie?
Those weren't bad films, man, back in the day with Christopher Reeve.
No. I liked him as an actor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he was better than Ronald Reagan.
I didn't see any of his
And
original
the
films, but I'm sure TK was there.
As an actor or as Superman? I was like, because you got me for a second. I'm like, he never played Superman in a movie.
Yeah, I don't know why that popped into my head, to be honest with you. I guess they kind of had like a similar aesthetic. That dark-haired, slim, tall, strapping young lad, if you will.
Yeah. The last man to wear a brown suit in public and rock it.
That's true. That is true. Yeah.
Who wore that? Reagan or
Reagan. I was going to say we were talking about like GE and their graduate program, which we've talked about on the show before, and I was going to tell you that when we were talking about people going through the graduate program in upstate New York, I had an interesting connection to some of those people when I was living and working for the Salvation Army in Connecticut. In winter, it was a big deal because we had the Angel Tree program, which they still have. But for those that don't know, the way it works is typically the Salvation Army will put up a big tree at a mall or a big public location, and the public will essentially buy an angel on a tree, and that represents a family. And then you'll go shop for Christmas presents and stuff like that and turn it in back to that location. And then there's a whole supply chain and logistical network behind that then bundles all that up, takes it to, let's say, a close by Salvation Army office. And then the families show up there around Christmas and they get the package. And it's like a big sack of stuff. And I used to work and help run that during the Christmas season. And that's where I encountered a bunch of GE people up in New England of going through that program and studying like specifically management, supply chain, logistics, and shit like that. Because it was a huge effort to not only get all that distributed in the right places geographically, but then collect it and then redistribute it.
Right.
Yeah, that was an interesting thing. I hadn't thought about that in a long time.
Last Christmas in particular, I was going to the grocery store or whatever, and the guys out there and they're with the bell and they're doing their thing. And how many people like legitimately carry cash on them now? Right. I mean, it's a rarity that I have cash on me. I mean, I think you're probably seeing a lot of people now with being this, the whole pandemic there where people went and got cash. So they got it on them because that's what we do. You hoard cash and toilet paper now. Apparently, I don't see the thing.
Well, in case you run out of toilet paper, you have the cash.
Right. Well, if they keep quantitative easing, it will be worth toilet paper. Right. But that's a whole other show. And, but I was just, the guys are standing there and I said, this is going to be hard for you guys now because nobody carries cash. He's like, we're not out here to get cash anymore. He goes, we do. People, some people walk by and get donations. He's like, but they're like 70%. They still get the same amount of money, or they're doing the same amount of business, in air quotes, every year. But what it is a reminder, and people go on the website. And they donate through the website now because it's just the way we think. And he goes, that was a hard thing for us because for a while we didn't make it easy for people to give us money, right? You guys have heard me say that, like in any endeavor, like make it easy for people to give you money if you're selling something. But now you can go on there with whatever mechanism you choose to e-pay with, you can do that. And he goes, I think our per individual giving is up. Because we're not asking somebody to reach in and look at a bill and go, here's how much I'm giving. People are giving from the heart because it's an air transaction and they go, and so they do very well. Have you guys ever seen the chart on what charities, like where they're at on how much of that goes to, how much of your donation goes to the charity?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So in the Navy, it's called Combined Federal Campaign, and it literally it's a charity drive, and you can donate to any charity. Every charity in the Navy gets a 4-digit code, and again, in making it easy for you to give, you basically go to the pay office and say, "Hey, here's my 4-digit code for what I want to donate," and they'll every month for a year they'll take it out and they do that, right? Well, they used to, and I don't know how they do it now, but when I was in, they used to give us a book, right, and like a loose leaf soft side thing, and it would go through every charity what they did. More importantly, it would tell you how much of it went to what percentage of every dollar went to actual helping people, and what percentage went to salary. And like Goodwill is not actually a charity.
No.
Right. The guy, it's the most, Dan, should be an MBA case study. Is the guy started this. He pays $0 for his inventory. He pays his employees damn near minimum wage. He takes $3 to $4 million a year, and then they resell the stuff. There's no, and he's got it under the guise of that, but almost, like it's not the, United Way is another one. How much of that goes to charity? Not what you would imagine.
Well, Goodwill's a great
CEO of Goodwill makers. Really, not Goodwill. What was the CEO of Salvation Army make a year? He gets a house, or she get a house, but modest accommodation, makes like $15,000 a year. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Salvation Army officers are not paid much.
No, but that's like, where do I give my money to? Right? If I want to help somebody, who am I going to help? I'm going to help the people that aren't basically getting. It's like the PETA people. Like PETA headquarters is here. They got better security than they do on most military installations. Why? Because they need it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you got Ingrid Newkirk, the hypocrite, driving around in her Lexus Mercedes with leather seats. Like, we're not like, don't like stop talking to me already, right? About animals and what you're doing or what you're not doing. Those leather seats, they're not faux leather.
Right. Yeah, the Salvation Army is an interesting organization. I mean, having worked for them inside for a long time. I don't know how many people realize or really care to know, but shit, let's run this down and see where it goes. So you have the office, which is attached to a church, okay? And so the main function of the officers, it's typically a married couple, in that location is to run the soup kitchen, the pantry, all the donation and stuff, like the Christmas tree stuff I was talking about, and they're ministers in that church. In most major cities, there's also what's called an ARC, an adult rehab center. And so that's for drug and alcohol. And it's what do you call it? It's a paid rehab service. So in order to get in there, you have to pay to be there. And there's certain criteria you have to meet and all that stuff. Those people are the people that are patients in the ARC, let's say, because that's run by another officer set, not the same officer as the church. The people that are there for rehab are also the people that work in, let's say, the warehouse for the donation, the Goodwill equivalent donation center, where you can go into a Salvation Army and buy like thrift type stuff. That's all staffed and run by mostly people that are in rehab.
But that's okay, right? I think that's great.
Yes, to do to keep their mind off.
Right? You're giving them a sense of purpose.
Yeah. And I don't know the logistics of that because I never worked in an ARC. I just worked with those people. So I don't know if they're paid for their labor. I would imagine maybe they are, or somehow it goes in with them being there. I don't know how that works. But the church and administrative side is where I worked, and I know how all that works on the inside. Right. It's a really interesting system. But yeah, they typically, officers have housing. Like I lived in a house that was owned by the Salvation Army. And but yeah, you're not paid very well. You're not paid very well.
But again, I think that, for people that donate, right, what you put in, the majority of it goes back out, and it's to helping people that need help, right? And I think, under the guise of where we're trying to help people, how many charities actually work the 501c3 system for their own largesse, so to speak, right? And
well, that's kind of the biggest difference. Goodwill is donated or is categorized as a nonprofit, while the Salvation Army is a charity.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can only speak for the time that I was there and the place I was in. The place I was in was not a good place, believe it or not, in Connecticut. It was absolutely dreadful. Man, they did all kinds of good stuff. Like if you had some type of problem in your home, so like the physical structure of it, right? The Salvation Army would get donation of labor from contractors to come and help you rebuild like a wall that fell down, or I'm making that up, right? To if you just had trouble meeting food demands for your family, you could come to the pantry. I ran that for a while. That was like my first logistics job, was managing intake of soup cans, no shit, and then packaging it up. And we came up with a system to get things like, okay, beans, green beans, you know what I mean? Like combining things into a bag so that it wasn't just all black beans or all kidney beans, you know what I mean? And distributing that back to people. That was really interesting work.
What's the number one item that people ask for at homeless shelters and places like that when they go in?
I don't know.
Socks.
That makes sense. Sure.
Socks, clean socks.
Mm-hmm.
There's a company out there and they do great work. They're called Bombas. You pay for their socks, right? They're magnificent socks, and they don't have any seams. I mean, they've just done a great job of making a sock. It's like I'm not a big fan of wearing socks like in general, but when with leather shoes and stuff, I do. Obviously, they make great socks. For every pair you buy, they donate a pair to the homeless shelters, and they originally were like, hey, we're going to donate 1 million pair. Well, that's when people hear that, they're like, okay, I'm going to overpay for my socks, but I'm also helping somebody else out. They've donated 10 million socks already, right? Because it is the number one thing. We have what's called the Union Mission here, and it's the same type of thing. But it's on the local level.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids over the years have gone and volunteered there. Thing, and it was, again, it's like they get these big influxes of food either from individual donors, but more now it's companies, right? That they've overmade a certain amount of goods, and they'll drop in, and so you're trying to get them in the shelves, get them in the bags, and working that system right there. That's when you start asking people, hey, what do you guys really need? And everybody, and we need socks.
Right.
And I think, you got clean, happy feet. The rest of your life isn't so bad.
Yeah, right. This is going to be hard. Go ahead.
When you buy those socks, how much of that can I write off on my own taxes as a donation, since I'm technically contributing to that donation?
I never was thinking about it in those terms, Dan, but we can ask.
Yeah.
I never was like, what's in it for me? That didn't flow through the little bit of brain pain I got.
Hey, if I'm a part of the donation, I need to be able to take some of that off on my taxes.
I know.
I pay enough in taxes as it is.
Do you?
Yeah. Probably more than what I should be.
On that one for a while. I'm gonna step back a little bit.
I was gonna say, and it just got reinforced. It's gonna be a hard jump to the topic we were actually gonna talk about, but I'm gonna go for it. So apparently this week, not apparently, I read the report. The Patent Office ruled that artificial intelligence cannot be, at least in record, the named inventor for a patent. What do you guys think about that?
I agree.
I do too. But who do we say is the named inventor? The inventor of the algorithm, like who built the AI? Is it that type of thing, right? And I understand why they do it, right? I'm down with that. As a guy that runs a company that purports to do some AI, right? Even though I don't like to say it in those terms, but I think I can't imagine in today's world why that, like, I think that's a good idea right now. Hold a human accountable. We're not there yet, right? We're not there with the machine life yet. Hold a human accountable for what's invented.
Sure.
So it's going to wind up going down, and I don't know. maybe in my lifetime, maybe not necessarily TK's. He's already lived several lives, so who knows? But it's going to go down that I'm going to the next thing is going to be the Crusaders are going to be, oh, you're biased against AI. Artificial saying AI is, I don't know, you're it's going to be whatever the next phobia is. I can't even think of how I would say AI is a phobia, but as all those things that are going down. And it's funny because on one of Joe Rogan's podcasts, they were actually talking about that, about how, hey, AI is going to be, but saying later, AI is going to be considered offensive to all those AI beings.
Well, it's offensive now because most people don't do it, right? There's, on one end, you got machine learning and data science, and on the other end, you have true AI, and true AI is very rare. When I go in, I don't, when we're pitching to customers and everything, I don't talk in terms of AI. We talk in terms of decision intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And our IP, the things that we've got IP for, are about helping you make decisions at the speed of light. It's not you. There's input, right? And the algorithm.
There's also an output.
Well, but you have to own it. It's not just something that magically happens. You have to say, hey, how do I make a decision? Right? No adult makes a decision in a binary fashion. Right? Everything is you're going to go out in the morning, leave the house. As a 10-year-old, you might go, well, it's 40 degrees. I'm going to get a big thick coat. As an adult, you're going to go, well, by noon it's going to be this temperature, but I think, okay, I need to layer. Right? What do I need to layer? Right? And so you start breaking decisions down into much more granular thing. And but even that, like, when I started working there, I was like, do we do AI or what do we? No, because true AI I think is very rare, and big companies are the ones that are doing it because they have the resources to really put against it. And there's some great thought out there, and some people are doing some amazing work, but I think we're on the way. And a buddy of mine he was the he's going to be the first West Point graduate who's the commander of an aircraft carrier, right? And he jokes around and says it's the only reason he stayed he did a lat transfer from the Army to the Navy. He says the only reason he stays in the Navy now is because he wants to be the first, right? This dude is unbelievably intelligent, right? Because for those people out there that don't know, in order to be the commanding officer of an aircraft carrier, it's an 8-year process, right? You make captain in the Navy, and you can go one of two ways. You can either go be the commander of an air group, which a lot of guys like doing because you don't have to go back to school, or you can get on the carrier track. You go to nuclear power school, right? If you've not been, because you're a pilot. First off, you have to be a naval aviator, right? And a fixed wing guy, pretty much, right? But you've got to be a naval aviator, which there's a process for that, right? Early in your career. Then you have to go to nuclear power school after you've probably not been in school for a while, and that's another year or so. Then you have to go be the XO of a carrier. Then you have to go be this commanding officer of a deep draft vessel, meaning a big ship, mostly like a cargo ship or an oil ship, because you have to learn how to be a surface officer effectively. So you have to go to surface warfare school. You have to do all these things. And so finally, at the end of this 8 years, he is now going to go and be the CEO. But he got put into procurement for the aircraft carrier. This is when we talk about leadership, and I say that most CEOs in the civilian world, they show up and a lot of them aren't prepped to be the CEO because it's the next thing. It's not a conscious, this is where you're going to go if you're going to keep staying in business, right?
Right.
In the military, everything from the time a young officer is first in the military as an ensign or a second lieutenant, they grow in responsibility, and every stop along the way is designed to give them a different experience to make them very well-rounded by the time they're given the keys to the store, so to speak. And so he was in procurement in DC, and he was like, everybody comes in and they read the request for proposals and all the mechanisms. People go online to find out what the Navy wants to buy, for example. He goes, they just parrot what's in the RFP. And he goes, one of the times he goes, I asked the guy, I gave him a dry erase marker, and I said, please explain what you're doing. Right? And both of like when we were at Sound Circle, people would come in, I go, show me how it works. Because I guarantee you, I know how it works. Like, show me how it works. One guy said to me, he goes, well, there's a whole bunch of high-level math involved. And he's like, he goes, I'm a nuclear engineer. Like, get on the board and do it, right? Or get out.
Right.
And so when he started asking what we were doing, it's explaining it in 8th grade terms, right? He goes, TK, you don't understand how you could sell this to the military. It's just for the fact that you can explain it in plain language. You're not trying to BS anybody. You got some magic behind the scenes. I'm like, our magic is the process, right? The algorithms, they're the algorithms, and we can trade them out. We can whatever you like, right? But the process is the magic, and that's what we have IP on, is how we do things. When you're talking about AI, true AI, taking over and being the inventor of something, how does the true AI invent the process? Right? At some point, there has to be human input, and once you say there's human input, there's human thought, and that's where I think we're saying I'm not up for the AI being the inventor, because at some point the human had to give it some level of effort. And right now, do we want the machine to be responsible for anything, or do we want a human? And right now, I vote for human.
Well, to me, having an AI as the originator for intellectual properties is a lot like saying the apple that fell on Newton's head is the one that invented gravity.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like,
that's a great metaphor.
Thank you. I mean, we have patents. I didn't register my computer. It is a closer analog as a co-inventor. It's a tool that I used along the way to help me achieve a means. Right.
Because it can process things faster than you can.
Yeah. Well,
it's speeding up the process. You still have to do all the input, do everything else, but it's just speeding up the process.
Right. No different than, look, we talk about cooking a lot, right? I mean, I could go cook over an open fire, but why do I want to do that when I have convenience afforded through appliances? That's why I have the appliances. They help me mediate that experience, let's say with more granularity or more control.
Yeah.
But it's still effectively a fire. I mean, in one form or another.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're all going to be burning in hell for being anti-AI in 15 years.
That's not the reason I'm going to be burning in hell. But okay,
yeah, right. I mean,
have at it, right?
That's the most recent reason why
we're going to have
add it to the list.
Our episode, if we just want me to read in succinct form the reasons I'm going to hell, right? It's not because I'm anti-AI. I'm not at all.
I absolutely agree. I mean, AI is a tool.
Yeah.
It's not going to be able to determine, even it gets to the point to where it is human-like. It's not going to be able to, on its own, determine if it likes chocolate or vanilla ice cream. It's going to be based on its programming.
Yeah.
Well, by definition, it'll never be more than like, hence the word artificial, which means imitation.
Right.
I mean, Jesus Christ, you're going to get me started on this whole. No, but part of what you're talking about too is an interesting problem called Rocco's Basilisk, which is this idea that in the far future, when we have sentient machines, they'll know who was in support of developing sentient machines, and all those people that weren't in support of it are going to get punished accordingly. That's a summary of the problem. It's called Rocco's Basilisk. I love people, man. I really do. Could you imagine being around and you're like, oh yeah, man, I guess I can, because it's not that different than the concept of heaven and hell, right? There's this far off punitive or reward system.
Well, but do you believe in that?
I didn't say I believe in it. I mean, I don't believe in Odin either, but I recognize his position in mythology.
That wasn't the question I asked.
Re-ask your question that maybe I misunderstood.
So does that mean you believe in heaven and hell?
I don't know why you would infer that.
It just came to my mind. I'm just asking the question.
I don't think of future.
Let me say it this way: do you have faith? And I don't care what faith is. Like, do you? It's that. Do you believe there's a higher being? Do you? I always. Jared came home to me one time when he was taking comparative religion in school and said, "I don't believe in God." All right, and this statement apparently happened with a lot of kids in that class, that year group in school.
Sure.
To the point where they got rid of comparative religions because enough people freaked out, enough parents freaked out because their kids came home and said, "I don't believe in God." I took it the other way. I go, "Well, what do you believe in?"
Right.
And they go, "Here's what do you mean?" I go, "You don't believe you're the supreme being." All right. Dan, I know this is we're straight away. You can sit there quiet because I know you believe that, right? But and I'm down with that. Right? It's your belief, but I go.
It's more than just a belief.
I know exactly. I'm like, go worship a head of lettuce. Name him Ralph, right? But have a belief that you're not the supreme being. And I said, what you're saying is you're not believing in something you can't see. Right. And he's like, yeah, generally. And I go, so that's faith, right? That you believe in something you can't see. And at the time he was like, well, I go, so what do you believe in? What do you think? He goes, well, I want to check out the whole Buddhism thing. And remember Andrew that used to work with us at Silent Circle for a while? Eminently smart, socially awkward, really thing. His wife is Thai and she's Buddhist. I said, well, let's go talk to Andrew's wife. Mm-hmm. Right. And what it did is it de-escalated a situation, right? Because it's what we do, right? It's like it's part of why I send my kids to Catholic school is there's a faith aspect to it. And I don't say Catholicism or anything else. There's a faith aspect where you're asked to look at it. And I got this from my dad. My dad was unbelievably faithful, right? As a Christian. But he looked at the Bible as history. It was an outpouring of love for him to God and Jesus, but he also looked at it. And so he was my Sunday school teacher growing up the whole time. Mm-hmm. But it was about the history of the Bible, right? And knowing that this was written over some people say decades, but centuries of how we got there, right? And when you compare it with other books of faith, for example, the Torah is the Old Testament effectively, right? But when you look at Islam, right? The Quran was essentially over one guy's life, mm-hmm. right? And if you read the front part of it, it's religion of peace. If you read the back end of it, it's a different book. Mm-hmm. And when they ask Muhammad, when there's conflicts in the book, how do I justify? He goes, well, whatever's written later is what we want. And if you think about it in today's society, really, like we've got the short attention span theater. So people read the first couple chapters like, oh, what a peaceful religion. Well, I don't get to the part that is driving everybody, right, is driving bad behavior, right? In a certain segment of that total population of 1.2 billion faithful Muslims, right?
Right.
And I don't care which faith you have. There is going to be a certain part of it that they take things literally. Mm-hmm. Right? Sure. And the more you can go, I have belief in there's something that's a being that's of a higher purpose than myself. Yeah. Right? You can serve. Right. And that, I think, to me, is the important part about faith, is it allows you to go and serve. It's the important part about leadership, is that it's not about you.
Well, it intrinsically, the way I look at it, and I'll answer your question in a second, Dan, because I haven't forgotten. It intrinsically, the way I imagine it, orients you on a line as opposed to just a dot. So if I am the source of all supremacy, then I'm a dot in space and I can't orient myself, right? Whereas if I have an external thing that I'm in some way oriented towards, now I can change direction as needed and move, right? And so to answer your question, Dan, I'll answer it with 2 points. And you can read into this however you want, and I'm not going to explain it past what I have to say. In order, at least in the United States, and specifically in North Carolina, in order to be a Freemason, you have to declare a belief in a supreme being. It's undefined. Okay? In order to be a York Rite, what's called Knight of the Order, or a Knight Templar, you have to swear an oath of fealty to defend the Christian faith.
Now, do they care whether that's a certain, like pick any of the Protestant, things, or Catholicism, or any, because largely, I don't think that, I'm ignorant to a lot of the Masonry, so this is mm-hmm. part of my ignorance. This is like, are there a lot of Catholics?
No, typically the Catholic Church frowns heavily upon Freemasonry, given
right. That's right. And I'm like, so. But here's the thing: they can frown on whatever they frown on, right? I mean, if I, as an individual, say I want to go I want to go be a Mason,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a Catholic, are they going to go, no, you can't?
There's nothing in Freemasonry that I'm aware of in North Carolina, at least, because things can differ a little bit between states. States have autonomy, how they run.
Well, I'm going to say
themselves.
in the you start getting into the South and you go to the deep South, if they don't have, if it's, and please don't at me on this, like America,
You're either Catholic or Baptist in the Deep South. I mean, that's basically what it
right? And more.
If you say you're
leaning
Baptist,
towards
which Baptist are you?
Yeah, well, so I'm just trying to couch it because there could be exceptions. I don't know of any, but there could be. Largely speaking, Freemasonry won't ask what deity you believe in. They just ask, do you believe in a higher power or a supreme being, is the way it's couched. There's no questioning past that. So it could be anything you want it to be, up to and including your Ralph head of lettuce.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Catholicism has a problem with Freemasonry. I know there have been cases in the past where a Catholic parishioner was discovered to be a Freemason and they were excommunicated because of it. Take
Really?
that for whatever you want. Yeah. I don't think the modern Catholic Church has that stance because they have a problem with getting people to, you know what I mean? But technically speaking, that's the way that works. Now
this is a big reason, Jason, why I say you shouldn't just be running for city councilman, because you did a great job of not answering the question.
Governor.
well, I'm not done yet.
Governor.
And so that's true for what's called
sucker suit with a bow tie on the front porch of the governor's mansion, talking like Foghorn Leghorn.
I say. So that's true for what's called Blue Lodge, the first 3 degrees. It's just okay. York Rite is a specific appendant body, and the culmination of the York Rite are what's called the chivalric or the chivalry degrees. The last one of which is called the Order of the Temple or the Knights Templar. That is the only one in all of Freemasonry that is specifically Christian. And so this is what you're asking, TK, I think. It's not discussed past that. So you don't have to be a specific Christian. You don't have to belong to a specific church. You just have to declare your fealty to defend the Christian faith. That's it.
And I like that because what you're saying is, or what they're saying is, Christianity is Christianity. Mm-hmm. And we're not, and I will say around here, you get people that get really specific about it because, this is the buckle of the Bible Belt right here. Mm-hmm. Pat Robertson lives here, and there's a certain kookiness, and I don't mean that in a disparaging way. What I find is, and Catholics are the same. They're like, hey, you either practice Christianity the way we want, or we're not. You're not in our club, right?
Oh yeah, sure.
And you go to a Baptist school here. There's no it's footloose, right? There's no dancing and there's no alcohol. Mm-hmm. When you go to an event at a Catholic church, they're definitely selling alcohol because they're about making money and they know what the parishioners want, right? And it's like, give us what you want. And it's it's the one thing about Christianity that drives me nuts is my version of Christianity is better than yours.
Yeah, right.
Right. Rather than just saying, hey, you have faith and you're trying to live a better life based on the fact that you're not the supreme being and you're trying to go somewhere. Like, no. It's like, I've heard Baptists say, well, Catholics don't know the book.
Yeah, sure.
I'm like, really? Like, or Catholics are like, oh, you can't marry in our church because you're not a Catholic.
That's right.
Right. And it's like, you're basically trying to say in today's world, I'm not talking 100, 200, 500 years ago. Right. The reason that the Catholic Church had such a ardent stance against birth control was they wanted to make more Catholics. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, it's not like, what I mean? Like, we got to keep we have to have the next generation of donors showing up. Right. And again, all the Catholics out there don't at me. Right. But that's, what do you,
it's historically true.
Right. But even now, like, you look at the abortion argument, right? You have people that say, I'm anti-abortion and I'm anti-birth control. Pick one. Right?
Yeah, right.
Just go with one. You can be anti-abortion and I'm down with that. Right? But you can't be both. Right? You're saying in all cases, it's a free-for-all, right? No. It's
right.
Be thoughtful about what you're doing.
See, and that's kind of what I like about this idea, like, for instance, in the Blue Lodge, the first 3 degrees, which is it's required. To clarify for people, in order to join the York Rite, you have to be a Master Mason. So you have to go through the first 3 degrees.
Right.
The whole 32-degree thing that people talk about, that's another appendant body called the Scottish Rite, and it's completely separate. And so the third degree is the highest degree. The other things are just lateral to it. There are different ways to understand what I like about this, which is a narrative that has moral code woven into it through symbolism. And so that's why, like, if you go into any lodge anywhere in the world, they all have the G, and you can interpret G however you want. It can stand for God, geometry, whatever, right? And for different people at different times, it stands for different things. But what I like is this idea that you have to have an affinity for, you can say, deity or supreme being, and it's not discussed further. That's left to you to interpret and exercise how you see fit. And here's the better part. It's forbidden to discuss the specifics of it. That's
perfect, right? I've said I have a belief, and you take me at my word.
That's it.
We all move on.
Yep. And so I would assume, given where I live, most of the people that I fraternize with are Southern Baptist. It's probably a good fucking guess, but I have no idea, and I'll probably never find out, because unless I go out.
Statistically relevant guess.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty safe, right?
Yeah.
But unless I go out for beers and dinner with them and we get into a deep discussion, which I have with a few people, I would never know, because when you're at that place, you're not to talk about that.
That's perfect.
And that's exactly why. It's to avoid the tribalism.
Your brand of God is better than my brand.
Exactly. Right? Yeah.
It's like, be a good person. Show up, like, help old ladies across, the basic stuff. Like, show up and be a nice person every day of the week, and do those things. And you're a person of merit, right? And it doesn't matter what building you show up in on a Sunday, or if you do. And I think especially with younger folks today, a lot of that is missing, right?
Yeah.
And there's 100 arguments as to why that happens or not, but it's are you trying? I think being a person of faith, it's like, are you trying to be a good steward of life, right? And however you define that. And I don't care. Like I said, I don't care what religion you practice. Are you trying to be better tomorrow than you were yesterday in the human race?
Mm-hmm. That's right. So did I answer your question sufficiently, Mr. Ford?
Definitely not, because I absolutely believe you could take an oath to defend Christianity, because you believe in people's right to believe in whatever they believe. And you would defend everyone's right to believe however they want. So no, you didn't answer the question. It was, like I said, you should be going much higher than that for city councilman, and at least be going for,
You run for governor, Jason. I'm going to run your campaign. I'm down. You run for governor. And we are definitely seersucker suiting you to the hilt. We're going to Joseph A. Banks and buying you like 10 seersucker suits of different, like a light blue, a light pink, and you're going to be out there every day with a bow tie.
I own bow ties. I like them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We just got to work on how you talk. You're not ready for you're not ready for Asheville yet. Oh, I say, boy.
Hey, Asheville's kind of cool. I know some people from
love Asheville.
I know some people from a lodge up there, and they always come down to see us. And these dudes have it right. Okay. Typically speaking, you show up how you show up. There's no dress code for most things, right? No, but these dudes have group affinity.
Just show up.
They wear overalls. They all wear overalls at this.
That's awesome.
And, dude, it's awesome. And they have them embroidered with the lodge and all this stuff. It's because the details are kind of important when you're within the system. And these guys show up as one unit, and it's like their uniform. That's awesome. Great. It's great.
I dig that.
Yeah.
I like anybody that's themselves.
Amen. Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? Like, don't show off for me. Don't do anything. Show up and be yourself.
Right. Exactly.
So it's very similar. So I don't know if I ever told either of you, but at one point I was an elk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the whole reason for this was that.
Why'd you pick them over the moose?
My dad was actually also a moose at one point too, but so he was the exalted ruler of the lodge. But how he got to ERs, he was there, he was a member, and he decided he wanted to be the ER. So the entire softball team became members 2 days before the elk softball tournament. Needless to say,
landslide.
Hands down won the tournament, because it had been done by some in the Mid-Atlantic reaches, some lodge in like Pennsylvania had won it like 10 years in a row, and they wanted to win it. So the entire softball team, wind up becoming Elks like 2 days
Voted
before.
for Mr. Ford Sr.
So see, in Blue Lodge Masonry, they've experienced little things like that because, of course, there's inner politics. It's human beings, right?
Right.
And so there's actually an extensive process to become a member. And so you can't have like these sudden signups to shift power. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Can't be stuff in the ballot box.
Oh, well,
no.
you couldn't. You couldn't. In this case, you had to be a member for a certain period of time before you could even vote.
Right.
So,
yeah.
In this case,
Apparently, that's 2 days.
No. This was just to win the softball tournament. The resulting of the softball tournament is what pushed the other people, because they had now the pride and this was Mr. Ford wound up setting all this stuff up, so he must be the person that we need to go.
He must be exalted.
Yeah. None of us had an opportunity to vote. We just won the softball tournament, which
So Jason, from Masonry, have you thought about doing the Shriners, right? Because that's an extension of Masonry, right?
That's an appendant body, yeah.
Right. And then from there, it's the Jesters, right? And that's kind of like you have the body of Masons, then you go to the Shriners, and then you go to the Jesters, right?
I could definitely see Jason as a Jester.
The ROJ, the Royal Order of Jesters?
Jesters, yeah. So the way it works is you have to be a Master Mason to join any of these things. So at minimum, you have to do the first 3 degrees. And then once you get your first 3 degrees, which depending on where you're at, takes different amounts of time. It took me about a year to get all 3 degrees. There's an enormous amount of information you have to memorize and then recite in front of everybody. And it has to be perfect. It's all the stories and the metaphors.
It can't be that hard. I know a guy that's limited in his ability to remember shit, and he's a Master Mason, so it can't be that hard.
Different jurisdictions have different requirements.
EJ, shout out to you.
Not all jurisdictions have the same memorization requirements.
Right.
And it's not hard. It's a function of time, you know?
Right.
Anyway, there's a whole purpose to it, which is boring, but I found interesting. After you get your 3rd degree, then at any time, you don't have to, you can join any one or potentially all of these appendant bodies, and there's a shitload of them. And then they have some of them, like Scottish Rite has 32 degrees, 33 is honorary. So you have to have like a lifetime of service, and then you're given a 33rd degree as a reward. The York Rite has 13 degrees. And then there's the Shrine, and then there's the Cedars of Lebanon. There's crazy amounts of stuff to do. And they all have their own little different focuses on what they do. They also have their all different charities they're attached to. So that people understand, like, it's in excess of millions of dollars a day that Masonry collects and donates. It's massive. And the Shrine, their expertise is children's hospitals.
Right.
Which is why they're always in the parades and driving the little cars with the fezzes.
Yeah. I like a good fez.
Yeah.
Underused headwear.
Yeah. Well, and that's because the Shrine, I
Damn,
don't remember
with an M on it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. The Shrine is they all have really long names, but they get abbreviated. The Shrine is an Arabian order, so it's attached to like a Arabian metaphor and narrative.
Yep.
The Jesters I don't have any experience with, but there's usually like a nested structure. And so like the York Rite has 3 sections to it, which is my expertise because that's what I went through. You have the first part, and then another part, and then you have the last part, which are the chivalric orders. And it's like the Knights of Malta, the Order of the Cross. No, I'm sorry, the Order of the Cross, the Knights of Malta. These are all separate degrees, and then the Order of the Temple. They all have different stories. They all have different purposes. You're in an area like this; it's basically all the same dudes, so you get to meet and see the same people. You know what I mean?
Right.
I dig it. I didn't think I would enjoy it as much as I do. I'll say that.
How did you get like one day you're not there and all of a sudden you're like, I can't live without doing this. How did you get to walk in and go, I want to be a Mason?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I lived in California years ago, I think I don't know if we had even met yet, Dan. Maybe around the time I started my doctorate, I thought about Masonry. It was just something that I thought about, like, oh, you know. And so the way you join is you ask a Mason to join, and there's a petition process and a background investigation, and it's a extended process. And so I contacted the lodge that was close to me and said I was interested in joining. And like a week later, a guy called me back, and I never followed up on it. For whatever reason, doesn't matter. But I always told myself, if I ever move back east, especially to a small rural place, because I could see that as a potential thing, I would do two things. I would definitely join a Masonic lodge, and I would probably end up running for office. There's just two things I thought I would be interested in doing. And so after I moved here, I kind of got set up, and I had some time. And I don't know if you ever met Guinea Khalsa in the doctoral program, Dan. He was the Indian dude, kind of bigger guy. Anyway, he became through the doctoral program at Capital, I met somebody who is a Mason in DC. And we were having lunch one time, and I asked him about it. And so that was a couple years ago. When I got here to North Carolina and I thought about joining, I called him and I'm like, hey man, I'm really serious about joining. What would be your recommended process? And so he reached out to every lodge has what's called there's officers positions, and there's a secretary, and the secretary basically runs the administration of the lodge. And that's a cool position because it's elected, you're voted on every year, but it's usually the same dude that does it pretty much his entire life if he wants to. And so there's a good bit of consistency. And so the way you communicate between lodges is through these secretaries because they all know each other. And so he called the secretary at this lodge I ended up selecting and got me set up. And that was basically it. I filled out a petition, paid my money, and started showing up.
Well, I don't know at that time, but I mean, you and I have talked about it on several occasions about joining, a Mason Lodge well before you did. And I know we at least talked about it while you were in California.
Yeah.
We had talked about those things.
California has a completely different system. When I was talking about the states governing themselves, like California has they're pretty progressive technologically. All the stuff I did, it was me and a dude sitting in this office, and he would recite the stuff to me and I would memorize it. In California, that's all online. You can watch videos. They just have a different way of doing it. Well, when you think about it, it kind of makes sense too because of how big they are. Like I could sit down with this dude once a week, twice a week, because it's just the two of us, and there's like 20 people in our lodge. The lodge I would have gone to had thousands of people. And so you can't sit down and distribute knowledge the same way. Not if you're going to do it at that scale. So it makes sense that they do it differently. Yeah, I don't know. I'm happy to answer any question you have, by the way. I don't.
No, I like I said, masonry now, there's a renaissance with it. I think, it did now, but there's a renaissance with it. And there's a couple friends of mine that have really gotten into it, right? And I'm always fascinated, because you're living your life, you're doing things a certain way, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, I want to go do this. And, just kind of the rites of passage thing that goes with that. Like you said, it's more than a little bit of effort to want to do it, which I think anytime you want to do anything, the kind of the heavy lift to become a member or to be in that club, whatever it is, or to graduate, to go get a doctorate, right? What's the heavy lift, right?
Right.
Or to go get your or do anything else, right? That's the thing that fascinates me, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the level of effort is always what keeps it from being everybody doing it.
That's right.
Right. And I think that's fascinating to me.
Well, so would you allow an AI to be a member? Because they would probably believe in a supreme being, like whoever its creator was.
I've actually brought that up. I'll give you a specific example. So two things. What specifically, at the time I decided to do it here, led me to it is for a number of years now with a friend of mine, we've been working on this idea that in part what leads to consciousness emerging is this narrative, this idea of narrative and archetypes. And so we encode a lot of our knowledge into symbols, just as people. And that gets communicated through stories via archetypes. And so we were working on this idea, and that's what brought Freemasonry back up to me, because at least the first 3 degrees, not all of them, but the first 3, you could spend a life analyzing the symbols and metaphors. It's really, really, really deep, which I dig. I dig it as a human being anyway, as a hobby. But with some of the stuff I work on, it's really interesting. And that's what led me to it. But I've actually talked about, because in North Carolina, not every state, but a lot of states are similar to this idea where for the first 3 degrees, you have to memorize all this information. You have to repeat it back, and it has to be not word for word, letter for letter perfect, but pretty fucking close to it, right? So, what happens when you have the possibility, which is easily within our lifetimes, of having even a narrow AI embedded, when you talk about like Neuralink or something like that, right? Where you can offload, let's say, a recording and then replay it internally, and you're not actually memorizing it. The AI is helping you do it. And so for what I had to go through, that fundamentally changes that experience. That's kind of what you're asking, Dan, in some way. I have my opinion. I have my opinion, but
do you think that, because like I said, when you memorize this stuff, it's all about metaphors and symbolism and things like that. Do you think that's a big reason why the Catholic Church has a problem with masonries, because they have their own, their own metaphors and symbolism throughout life?
Well, yes, and the Catholic Church likes to have a monopoly over metaphor. We know that. And I'm not bagging on just historical.
I know you're not.
Here's the real problem.
We don't have enough real discussion about religion. Like, this is good, this is bad. No, they're
right.
Faith, right? Like, and I start from that. Like, when people want to, because you get people around here, their version of Christianity is the like, no, everybody's got faith.
Yeah.
Right. And how do you manifest that? Sometimes sideways, but in general, let's start from the position that we all have faith of something and move there in a good spirit.
The real, as I understand it, barrier to entry for the Catholic Church to Freemasonry is rooted in 2 things. One is the idea that because it's a secret society, that there's heretical things that go on. And so, right, that would lead you to commit blasphemy and thus be excommunicated. The other thing is the Catholic Church experienced firsthand what happens when you let a secret society, the Knights Templar, gain power. And they ended up burning those fuckers in front of Notre Dame for it. You know what I mean? And so...
it's Notre Dame.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Yeah, and so
really, in that Crusades, when they were basically reaching out and going towards the Eastern Med and into traditional Arab countries, what were the Templars doing?
Well, by charge, they were supposed to keep the routes secure, and so they really were guards for supply chain. That was the idea,
and they were bankers. Right,
and they became a distributed bank. That's right.
Because along the way, how do we do this? How do we make sure that bring unto Caesar his, right?
That's right.
That's literally like they became the bankers as well. And after a while, the bankers got too powerful, and they were like, "Oh no, we got to slow this down." That's
right.
Right? Metaphor for today, maybe everyone out there in TV land, right? But that's and it's funny that now a lot of what you're doing in masonry, there's a Templar aspect to it, because I actually, until this morning, I didn't know that. And that's probably why the Catholic Church is like, you go over there. We know what the Templars can do when we let them run loose, right?
Yeah. Well, no, exactly. And so like you can compare and contrast that against the Knights of Malta. And so the Knights of Malta still exist. The Knights Templar don't, right? They were excommunicated. They were extinguished. A legitimate Knights Templar order doesn't exist in the same way. The Knights Templar that I belong to is based on it, but it's not the same thing. The Knights of Malta that I'm a member of is the Knights of Malta, or what some people know as the Knights Hospitaller. That's the original Knights of Malta. And so they were the Templars that weren't corrupted by the banking, essentially. They were given the same charge to guard the supply chain between West and East during the Crusades. And they were really good at it. But they never took on the banking aspects. So they didn't accrete power the same way.
Right.
Really interesting thing. Yeah. And so
there's a movement out there now to bring the Knights Templar back. Yeah. If you go online, you can look at you can become they'll send you the white robe with the red cross on. They'll do everything. It's a full on thing.
Oh yeah. And
and it's, again, people are looking to belong.
I was just going to say, and that's really what it is.
Right. And it doesn't matter whether it's masonry or whatever, right? And if you look at, our parents' generation, and things like that, they were habitual joiners, whether it was the Ruritans, the JCs, the Masonry, or whatever. They were clubs. My mom was in the garden club, right? And they would do things, and there was a charitable aspect to everything they did. Right. And it was the time and place, of Depression era parents that they were big joiners.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And even like country clubs, right? A lot of times people, because there was no, you weren't sending your kids to summer camps and all this stuff. And so that became a place to go have a family experience. Right? There was a pool there was tennis court, whatever. And however that manifested itself, you look now, one of the country clubs here, there used to be like $100,000 initiation. And a friend of mine has been a life member. His parents were members, and it's the oldest country club around. And so it's there's a legacy in his family of being a member of this club. And at one point, we were playing golf one day years ago, and he's like, "Hey, you want to join?" I go, "I don't have $100,000. I wouldn't anyway. Like, why?" He goes, "No. It's not like they've had to literally bring the initiation fees down to near zero to ensure the survivability of the club, because we're just not joining because there's so many things to do now."
That's right. Yeah, sure.
Before it was, hey, if you wanted to swim or you wanted to do something, you had to go to be a member of a club to do it, because they had swim teams and they would swim against each other. Well, now go out in town. You want to play soccer? There's an amazing amount of sporting, by rec leagues and stuff like that. It's kind of been taken away from that and given to the everyman. And I think we're just sucked up in time to where I don't have time to go do that.
Right. Sure.
And the whole concept of they have one restaurant, you got to spend a certain amount of money in there every month. And I'm not against the concept of kind of a minimum, but how old does that menu get?
Right. Well, see, and that's one of the things I personally like about Masonry. I'm sure the majority of people go for a lot of the same reasons you just said. You get to be part of a club or a group, that's identifiable, at least within itself. You get to talk to the same people at least once a month, right?
You build relationships.
Yeah, right. And it's just dudes hanging out, right? I get a different thing out of it. I like.
Are there female Masons?
No. Well, in the U.S. right now, there's like six immediate disqualifications from joining a Blue Lodge, one of which is being a woman. Now, once you have a Master Mason in your family, so like my wife and I, we could go join an independent body that's called Order of the Eastern Star. And that's a woman's thing, but you have to have a Master Mason that you're related to with you. Now, there are...
Could Bruce join?
What's that?
Could Bruce join?
There's a big discussion about that. Depends on the jurisdiction. In North Carolina, as long as Caitlin, because you're talking about Jenner, right?
Yeah, Bruce.
Yeah. As long as Caitlin was accompanied and related to a Master Mason, yes. But California is different, so I don't know what they do. What's interesting is there's a young men's organization called, check this out, here's your connection to the Templars, the Order of Demolay. So that's I think you're in that, you can join early on and up until you're 18 or 21. And then there's two organizations for girls, Rainbow Girls and Jobs Daughters. And those are for young girls. So that's the equivalent of Boy Scout, Girl Scout, because Boy Scout, Girl Scout came from Masonry. There was a dude that wanted to go off and do his own thing. There is, because I'm a Templar, there's an association for my wife when she's widowed that she can join. I don't remember the name of it, but it's for Knights Templar widows only.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say when.
Well, I mean, dude, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion for a number of factors that she'll outlast me. I'm male. I'm left-handed. I mean, I just keep running down the list.
I'm left-handed as well, and when I was at Blackbird in the office of the guys, and you know a lot of them, right? Is Morgan. Everyone in that office, but Morgan, was left-handed.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, like at some point it was like 6 or 8 people. It was like one guy. It's almost statistically impossible.
Yeah, I was going to say, because usually it's about 1 in 10 that are left-handed.
Yeah,
But
he was the outlier.
yeah. But other than that, I don't know of any pure Masonic organizations that now. There's a lot of stuff that purports to be Freemasonry that's not. Those are called irregular or clandestine lodges. They're not legitimate. In order to be legitimate, you have to have a charter from the Grand Lodge, which in turn has a charter from the Grand Lodge of England. So.
Now, where's the Grand Lodge in England? Where's that epicenter at?
London.
London? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I always imagined it to be out somewhere in the hills of, you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah, I don't know exactly where it's at, but it's a pretty big deal. It's a pretty
kind of like the old Austin Powers, when he's talking about, they meet in a place called the Meadows.
Well, like the lodge I go to is kind of a typical rural nondescript building, I mean, and all lodges are fundamentally the same inside, and they have to be by regulation. There's certain things that have to be in certain places, and they have to be oriented a certain way because they mirror King Solomon's temple architecturally.
Right.
But I've been like to Greensboro now, which is a much bigger place than where I'm at, and man, is that building awesome. It's fantastic. The amount of art and stuff in it, it's pretty cool.
I mean, well, just go like the history of the U.S. and the history of D.C. and building, what LaFont imagined, right? Is that the what we call the home field advantage, right? Being in D.C. as a world capital. George Washington was a Mason. Yeah. Right? And when you look at renderings and paintings of laying the cornerstones for the White House and things like that, there was always Masons. And it was an outward showing of it, right? It wasn't like they were just, oh yeah, those guys are Masons. They had, the outward trappings of being a Mason, right? You guys up in there's a hotel in DC, and it's literally like I never knew about it until somebody I knew went there. It's called the Mansion at O Street, and it's up by DuPont Circle. And when you look at it, it's in a row of brownstones. And it just happens that like 4 or 5 of these brownstones they're interconnected. And then there's and it's just really cool thing. It's nondescript. Like you don't get there by accident. You have to know how, and there's a certain way that you look at it. And when you go in there, they've got an I don't know how many rooms. It's quite a bit. Like, and I did the tour because one of the folks that I was with at a tech event has been going there for years. The owners are just unbelievably gracious and eclectic people. The wife is like the designer. Like every time there's a new administration or new occupants of the White House, she goes in and does all the design and moves everything. And her husband is on the board of directors of the Rock and Roll Museum.
Oh, sweet.
Right. And they're just, when you go in there, when you talk to people, there's no last names. If somebody wants to tell you what they do, fine, but you don't inquire. Right. It's very cool. And they always have like artists. It's, one of the things that they do kind of thing is if you're a traveling artist of whatever means or thing, you can go there, and kind of how people give back is if you're a singer or whatever, you perform at night in like this area. And it's like, that's kind of how you pay for your existence there.
Yeah, you're right.
And everything in the house is for sale. Like all the artwork is for sale, like that, except the guitars. Because a lot of the guitars are on loan from the museum. Right. And there's the room that Bruce Springsteen stays in. They're the room that Yoko Ono stayed in, and John Lennon. And they kept those period rooms alive, and they're really cool. And everything's interconnected. It's just really weird things. Yeah. Like all these hallways that thing. And there's like when you walk into the place, there's it's the Amnesia Room, they call it. Like when you walk in, you forget about what you bring in. And then when you're on the way out, you forget about what you did there. And it's this thing, it's like, hey, and you can be asked never to come back. Right. And when the first time you're going to stay there, you kind of have to reference how you got there.
Sure.
Right. But the cool thing about it is the reason it is the way it is because those brownstones were individual brownstones when the Capitol building was being built. And all of the masons and all of the artisans that were building it lived in those brownstones. Right. and they ended up opening them up so they could all, and they're master artisans. And so the building now is a master artisan place. It's one of these cool little places in DC that, everybody, you walk by it all the time and you'll never know what it is. And I finally now on Google Maps, somebody has put a flag in the ground there and said it's the mansion at O Street, which, okay, I get, but like when you're going to go there for the first time, you're given detailed instructions on what to do.
Sure.
It can be there. You're going to walk by it because there's no reference or name. But it was such an amazing, fun experience that I was like, one of these days I just have to stay there. Because I want to be on that. I want to be able to invite other people that would that think about it as the way I do. Like that, there's this great group of eclectic people, and we had a blast. You met so many fun people. I don't know their last names. I didn't care to know their last names. It was just such a fun evening.
Yeah, it's just about being in the moment, right?
Yeah, I think but it's a lot. Like one of the rooms has a pool table that I think it was Teddy Roosevelt. It was in the White House. It's just massive. It's the largest pool table I've ever seen in my life, with the lamp that was over it when it was on. And it's one of those things, because of the relationships that the owners have outside of it, they get a lot of this unbelievably relevant period pieces that you're like, wow, that's really cool. Like, I have a friend of mine that actually is friends of thing. It's an acquaintance that he owns the Delaware copy of the Constitution.
Oh wow, yeah,
right.
That's pretty special.
He was a hedge fund guy, and everything like that. He was like, how am I gonna waste my money, right? His money. He's like, I have all this large debt. What am I gonna do? And he was a history major in college, and one of them came up for auction, and he goes, buying it was the cheapest thing I did with it.
Yeah, sure.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
He goes, you don't understand. He goes, this is one of the 13 founding documents. He goes, actually, there was 14. There was the one that is in the National Archives, and there's one for each of the colonies at the time.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, he goes, they don't tell me.
Shouldn't there be one more? The one that we sent to King George?
Well, yes. But I'm talking about the ones that live here, right? And no, you're talking about the Declaration of Independence. I'm talking about the Constitution.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about the Constitution. But he's like, they don't tell you this when you're getting excited at the auction, because like you're like, I want to own this thing and I want to own it bad. But after you buy it, like you have to agree that the National Archives is going to maintain it. It has to be put in wherever you live. They come down and they go, nope, you can't put it here, because of the direct sunlight and all the other things that go along with it. And whatever the periodicity for maintenance is, you have to pay for the people from the National Archives to come to your house. They're going to be there for a while, so you have to put them up in hotels and everything like that. And then they do what they do. They block off that piece of your house, and they do their magic, whatever they do to maintain the documents. And he goes, I have friends of mine that are, they're as wealthy as he is. And he goes, and they waste their money on stupid shit. Right? He goes, I have a piece of America.
That's right, literally.
And I'm like, look at you, dude. You went berserk, making money and like living, flying your personal jet around, all the trappings of hedge fund success. And then one day you woke up and said, that's bigger than me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he goes, I don't care how much it costs, as long as I have money. He goes, I'd buy that. I'd take care of that before I'd take care of food sometime if I had to, right? If it came down to that. He goes, because it's that important of owning that piece of America.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
On that note, it's a good way to end it.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I like that. You give me a lot to think about while I go run.
Bueno.
Awesome. All right, my friends.
Have a good day.
Have a good day. Have a good week, everyone.
Yeah, we'll talk next week.
Yes, sir.
We'll find something about it. That's right. We did talk about what we were going to talk about.
It'll be the same channel. It might not be the same time, because we're plus or minus on this, depending on how much stupid crap we talk about on the way in.
Yeah, there's a little variance.
Hit the live button.
Yeah, you got to get warmed up.
There you go.
All right, everybody.
All right, everybody.
Cheers.